Hi, everyone. Christian asked me to record a short intro for this interview that I conducted with composer Alan Howarth. Back in 2014, I heard that Alan was going to be at the Macabre Film Festival, a local convention film festival on Long Island. John Carpenter is my favorite horror film director, and one of the key components to his films is, of course, the soundtracks he composed for them. Alan Howarth was his collaborator for some of my favorite Carpenter soundtracks, so I really wanted to speak to him, not only about his work with Carpenter, but his approach to music and soundtracks in general. The night before this interview, Alan actually performed a private one-man concert, which was phenomenal. He did all the themes from the Carpenter films, even ones that he didn't work on himself. Although the conditions for conducting this interview were not optimal, there was a lot of people around, Alan was really up for it. A number of times he actually took the phone out of my mouth. I was recording on my iPhone. He actually took the phone out of my hand and actually put it up to his mouth so that he could be heard more clearly. So I hope you enjoy hearing Alan talk about his career.
So are we doing this on radio?
No, this is going to be on a website.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe brought into a podcast as well.
That's fine. There's still a little...
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's good. I can always work with that, okay? Well, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I mean,
Sure.
You're like... I'm such a huge soundtrack fan, and your concert last night blew my mind.
Fantastic.
It was awesome.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Well, I guess I want to start with some of your pre-soundtrack work. Who are some of your earliest musical influences?
All right, so, I'm from the late 60s and the early 70s, so that was big influences of the Beatles. I discovered Pink Floyd when it was Syd Barrett. Big Floyd guy, all the way till today. They're some of my biggest guys. Then went on the sort of the English prog rock journey of Moody Blues and Genesis and Gentle Giant and Jethro Tull, and then also had from the English world, crossed over to the flower power of San Francisco. So the whole West Coast movement, including the Doors and the Jefferson Airplane. I remember Quicksilver Messenger Service. All that stuff. And then later on, as it went farther, got into like Crosby, Stills and Nash and Buffalo Springfield and all those guys. So kind of universal in the world of pop music. As a sort of the esoteric world, I was very much into Stockhausen, Yushashevsky, what was our guy, Morton Subotnick, Wendy Carlos. In the world of synthesizers and electronic music, I was always drawn to this what I'll call it original fresh textures. Sure. Like if you're a painter, there was blue, red, yellow, orange, green, but now there was these new colors you could play with. Absolutely. And do more with. So that really formed my musical palette of later times.
Sure. How about, I know you had some of your early bands like Brano and Pie Core.
Yep.
And I know you opened for the Cream and the Who.
Yeah.
How was that? That must have been
all right.
amazing.
Let's see. The band that opened for the Cream was a band called Renaissance Fair. Mm-hmm. We had a lead singer named Woody Leffel, who today is still as good as a Robert Plant. He's that gifted, and at that time we were kind of in a Doors thing. And we weren't doing original music. We were popular and good, so we opened for the Cream, and that was an eye opener to kind of be backstage with those guys. And then a little bit later after that, I was in a band called The Silk. We were produced by Bill Simzik, who also produced Joe Walsh and the James Gang simultaneously. So we were, and this is in Northeast Ohio. So because of our placement with the record company, we got to open for the Who. And that time we opened like 2, 3, 4 shows. So after that, the first night you're in amazement, oh my God, it's the Who. Second, you get backstage and they get to know your names. Third, hey Alan, hey Courtney, hey Chris, get to be buddies. And so that was a real window into the real guys, at the upper crest of the greatest in the world, and you get to be buddies with them. Right. And you realize they're normal guys. But the big aha for me at that, especially with the Who, was first night it's amazing, second night it gets normal, third night you go, wow, they do that every night. Wow, this is just professionalism and perfection of performance. And this was during the Tommy tour, so it was the Tommy opera they were performing, and just really got real for me.
Right.
And so that brought my up to a new level. So back to, you mentioned Pi Corp and Braino. So Braino, for the fans out there, watch for Braino. Because Braino was my first original band where I was the songwriter, singer, guitar player in the world of my early influences with the first, 2 Echoplexes and a Leslie and all this other effects on my guitars. It was a very effecty guitar thing, and a little keyboard and synthesizer work. And those tapes are in an archive waiting to resurrect. Pi Corp was second generation Braino, where we went into a long studio period where we literally just sort of rented a room over a pawn shop, and we'd go there and jam every night, and those jams got recorded, and the best of those jams is what is Pi Corp right now, and that's available on my website. I have a website, www.alanhowarth.com. There's a store there. These things are available, and it really is a reveal into who I am today in my early experimental days. And so some good fun stuff. And certainly, where did this guy come from? He was up in a pawn shop over top of a kind of a sleazy street in Cleveland, Ohio, creating this original space in spite of the environment and where he was.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I know you sort of branched out, and I know you worked with Weather Report, and I was wondering if you had any interesting Jaco Pastorius stories.
Oh, absolutely. Well, just a little bit about Weather Report. So, during the Braino period, we were the house band in a club called the Smiling Dog Saloon. And the Smiling Dog, a fellow named Roger Baum, who was the owner, had this little shtick of grabbing all these great jazz acts, traveling from New York to Chicago, and we would grab them during the week. So they're booked in New York on this weekend, and next weekend is Chicago. So he'd grab them for like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night thing. And Braino was the house band at Smiling Dog. So amongst I was into equipment, we had PA systems, so Weather Report comes into place for a night, and myself and our house sound guy, a fellow named Brian Risner, do sound for Weather Report. And Weather Report didn't have roadies or stuff like that. They were setting up their own gear. And so we did the number on them. We gave them echoes and quadraphonic, and they, who the heck are these guys? So they invited us to go out on the road with them. I had a job at a music store, so Brian was the one elected to become their first road guy, and Brian became the mysterious traveler and traveled with them. So about the time of Heavy Weather, this was about 72, so 4 years later, Weather Report has Heavy Weather and a hit, and now Joe Zawinul's keyboard system is elaborate enough that it was worth taking a specialist to go out on the road to keep that all working. So I was like the butler for Joe Zawinul, the keyboard player, and the bass player at that point is Jaco Pastorius. And I really was, it was about a 4-year period then of Jaco coming from young Jaco, the kid from Florida, rising to be the Jimi Hendrix of the bass guitar. I mean, there's no one that can go down the path of a fretless bass guitar and not go down the path of Jaco Pastorius. Tragic ending, should have never happened. He got unfocused and wound up, mouthing off to a bouncer in a bar and wind up hitting his head on the curb and in a coma, and he's gone. So he becomes another Jimi Hendrix of this world. He is the guy who did it and was gone early in life. But yeah, we just having Jaco in his young days, sort of with his bass sitting on your front porch, jamming away, doing all his harmonics and stuff like that, and you're going. And I was a bass player in those early rock bands, so I knew that this guy was just special, off the scale, special, original stuff. And after Weather Report, he went into a big band period with the Brecker Brothers and had a big band. A little bit for Jaco. Jaco cut his teeth in a big band of Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders. So all that funk was from playing with Wayne Cochran, who was sort of the white James Brown.
Right.
So his influences were multiples. Really a brilliant guy. He could sit down at the piano and play these unbelievable stacked chords. I mean, he was really brilliant, gifted person. And it's unfortunate he's not here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he was also into the party. So the hang with Jaco, which happened several times across the world, legendary nights of you can't believe what happened, and it was crazy, and everybody was doing whatever they were doing at the time, and at the same time, sitting with Jaco in the same room with Joni Mitchell and Miles Davis and Chick Corea and Al Di Meola and being with this crest of the greatest artists of that time. What a blessing. And that all those influences are in me. That comes out in what I do. So,
How did you meet John Carpenter?
So John Carpenter was introduced to me by the film editor from the first Star Trek movie that I did. So my very first movie was Star Trek the Motion Picture. I came aboard as a sound designer to create special sound. So I made warp drive, transporters, phasers, lasers, tricoders, all in my work of synthesizers. The film editor is a fellow named Todd Ramsey. And so Todd Ramsey's next assignment after that Star Trek was Escape from New York. I came aboard to be a sound effects person. But then I had been given Todd cassettes, of my music. And John Carpenter always worked with another person to do the technical part. So there was a fellow named Dan Wyman that was him during The Fog and Halloween. There was an opportunity. He was looking for other options. Todd puts me in front of John Carpenter. So I invite John Carpenter over to my house, a little rented house in Glendale. All my stuff set up in the dining room. Nothing's formal. Carpenter comes over. I play him some stuff, and he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, let's do it." That was it.
Is that how most of your collaborations worked, in the sense that...
Yeah. This was at a time before agents and agencies and the competition. This was really guys meeting guys, much like here at Macabre Fair. This is real people just meeting each other and forming relationships and having stuff begin to happen. And so I met Carpenter. We were basically the same age. He grew up in Kentucky. I'm from Ohio. So we had a lot of cultural similarities. We liked each other. And I was coming from Star Trek, so I had some, who is this guy? Well, this guy must be special if he's from Star Trek. So Carpenter, in his persona, felt comfortable, and we just started working together.
Wow, awesome. Now, in doing the score for Escape from New York, I always wondered, were you guys influenced at any point by the sort of the electro hip-hop or electro, like the use of drum machines, the funk? Because there is that kind of funky kind of drive to the music. I was just wondering if, because I know contemporaneously in New York, you had people like, African Bambaataa, you had, like more of the sort of electro hip-hop people using like Kraftwerky type.
Actually, a funny story. So for Escape from New York, I knew we were going to need drums. I went to this individual named Roger Lynn, and he had just invented the Lynn drum, which was the first drum machine that had digital samples of drums in it instead of synthesized sounds. And I literally went over to Rogers and said, "Roger, I got to have one of these things. I'm doing this thing, Escape from New York, and I want you to do this and this and this to the drum machine so I can run it with my synthesizers and sequencers, using it as the master clock for the whole system." So Roger was like, "Oh, really?" Met me, became buddies. I got one of the first Lynn drums. So that Lynn drum is the first introduction of the Lynn drum into a film score. And it drove all the sequencers, and we synchronized all that stuff. So again, my job with Carpenter was all technical in the beginning. I was also an artist, but I had to keep the studio running and make sure the red light was on when we were playing and go back and rewind. And it was before we had actual synchronization of the videos and the tape recorders. So Carpenter loved it because he referred to the whole process as electronic coloring book, which means we would improvise and just keep tracking until we felt the cue was built. And at that point, then resynchronize it with the movie and see how it worked. Prior to that, it was done by a stopwatch. I need a cue of 3 minutes and 42 seconds. We'd figure out a tempo and we'd kind of run it. But now this was the first really beginnings of picture and sound married together in a composer environment. After that, when we actually did get synchronization, from then on, we always performed the scores to picture.
When you did Halloween 2, I imagine sort of following up such an iconic score, and I believe you did Halloween 2 by yourself, right? I believe you scored that yourself. How did you approach it? I mean, were you worried about sort of not being too slavishly imitative to that, but yet not getting too far afield because it was a sequel?
Well, I'll give you the exact Halloween 2 story. So we've done Escape from New York. John is now, his next film is The Thing. So in a one paragraph or 2 sentence thing, John says, "Alan, I loved what we did together. I'm going to be busy on The Thing. You're going to do Halloween." Okay, well, just casual. So I said, "What do you want?" He says, "Well, they want to keep the score. They love the score from the original Halloween. why don't you get a copy of the multitrack, which was at that time an analog 16-track tape, make a copy and start there. So that's what I did. I went and made a copy of his original score, transferred it to a 24-track, so I had lots of empty tracks, and I began to overdub into the original John Carpenter Halloween score with my performances on top of that.
Oh, neat.
So I added a new layer or a new dimension, much like an orchestrator, because Halloween score is Halloween score. We don't throw that out. That's gold.
Right.
So I got to polish the gold and take it to a platinum level.
That's good. Well, and I guess my next question would be Halloween 3, because I know Halloween 3 was a sort of, they're moving away from the usual,
a
departure. So did you feel that the score itself, even though it was going to be called Halloween 3, did you feel that the score itself, approaching the score, was going to be a departure in that way?
Yeah. In fact, in that particular session now, instead of Carpenter not being there, he finally came back, and he enjoyed the scoring process. He said to me, Alan, doing the scores for movies is like taking vacation. Because from the responsibilities of a whole crew and a schedule and a budget and all that stuff, he finally got the kickback, just be another guy with me. Me and him in a room, alone, the phone's turned off, and he could relax and just have fun. So I think the fun factor is really reflected. So here's this session, we're going to do Halloween 3. We got a videotape. We sit down. At that point, I think we played a little bit of inspirational music in that he put on the latest Tangerine Dream record, and we kind of listened to all that. They were the masters of sequencing. So we listened to kind of what that was for inspiration. And then his creative direction, you'll like this, his creative direction to me was, Alan, I loved what we did for Escape from New York. All we're going to do is rip ourselves off. So let's just do it again.
Okay.
So that's where it started. The first cue was the opening sequence, which is now called Cherry to Pumpkins. And I worked up this sequence that was Halloween-like, without having the notes, but is in the flavor of a Halloween. But then we just departed from it, and we went off on our own thing. It's interesting, even though Halloween 3 is not considered a great movie, and had it not been called Halloween and only been called Season of the Witch, it may have been more embraced by the fan base. The score is constantly brought up to me as one of the most iconic electronic scores to a movie ever.
Yeah, I love that score.
Now, you don't know that when you're doing it, you're just doing it. But we just did our thing, and here we are 30-some years later, and it's still coming up as like, you guys did a really good job.
Yeah, I love that score. Actually, I want to talk a little bit about Prince of Darkness, because I felt that was a little bit of a departure as well.
Sure.
What were your influences, you and Carpenter's influences for Prince of Darkness? And also, I was wondering, whose idea was it for those strange, like, transmissions, the sound, like when they have the transmissions from the future with the, it was kind of like staticky kind of...
Sure, well, in the world of sound design, that was my bag. So he set me off on that path. The Prince of Darkness score, and I'm going to remember this now, is the particular ensemble of instruments, because I had the studio. In the doing of the movie before that, which was Big Trouble in Little China, was the first time I really had the MIDI, which MIDI stands for musical. First time I really incorporated the MIDI into the whole studio. So you could push down the key of one synthesizer or one keyboard and fire 9 synthesizers at the same time. So we started to create these huge MIDI stacks. Well, for Prince of Darkness, we included a new instrument which was called a synclavier. So that was the biggest, monstrous, most expensive digital synthesizer of the day. And sort of as a teaser, the company had sort of loaned it to me to, here, try this out. Well, I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. So there was a transition of MIDI to synclavier all merged together. But now we had what we call digital samples today. So prior to that, we were into a lot of analog synthesizer, what they sounded like and what you could do. But now we had digital samples of real sounds. So now the choirs and the recordings of real instruments was introduced as a new palette of textural colors that could be incorporated. So the choir thing, the voice thing was obvious for the son of the devil is returning. So this whole semi-religious texture gets employed. And then at the same time, the sequencing was very expanded, because we had, like on an emulator 2, there was a thing called an arpeggiator, which meant that the machine would pick through the notes that you held down at one time individually. So there was rhythmic sequencing, arpeggiation stuff that goes down. So like in the cue called Team Assembles, there's a really great bass line, which is boom, ba-ba-da, ba-da, ba-da, ba-ba-da, ba-da, 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 ba-da. Well, that's the arpeggiator. So all you would do is just literally hold down the chord, and the machine would pick through those notes for you. So there was a collaboration between man and machine that went down in that, and I think that's just great stuff. It's great stuff. In fact, there was an article once, I think about in 2001, somebody had made a collection evaluating the 100 greatest movie scores of the 20th century. And in there was Halloween, of course. But honorable mention, which means it didn't make it 100, it made like 105, whatever, was the Prince of Darkness score. So, and that's been used over and over again. We talk about a dark, evil something, crime scene, whatever. It's on YouTube. They use it in commercials all the time. It really hits the mark for that mood.
Right.
Yeah.
Neat.
Evil.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, like in the score for They Live, it seemed to be a little bit more bluesier, a little bit more. Sort of
that was a blues
rockier.
score. That was the idea, because here we are again. Remember, we're musical storytelling. So we've got a guy who's got no job. He's living in a cardboard city in some vacant lot in L.A. It's a blues orientation to the whole thing, and then the expansion of those blues themes throughout the movie. So because it's improvised, it was never planned or written out. We literally put the movie up, run the tape recorders, hit the red light, and start, and that whatever came out. Now, often the themes, these musical themes, are John Carpenter. I never want to take that away from him. He is brilliant in his own way, and these little themes, the hooks, that's him. But I got to play with him and expand on them and do my own thing from time to time. But you got John Carpenter sitting in the room. You're going to tell him not to do his thing? He's John Carpenter.
That's be tough.
Yeah.
How did you come to score Brutal?
So the score for Brutal, which actually won Best Film here at the Macabre Fair, not just for this year, but of all Macabre Fairs, they went and did a survey and a collection of looking at everything, and Brutal came up Best Movie, which is huge. The writer, director, one of the lead actors is Michael Patrick Stevens. Michael approached me in regards to another film that is still yet to be made called Haunted Caves. And it's another brilliant script. And in frustration of not being a first-time filmmaker and not being allowed to direct his own movie when the budget and the investors came along, elected to make Brutal as a proof of concept that he could write, direct, produce. So sort of, I was approached about Haunted Caves, but Brutal comes up as, oh, by the way, we're going to do this because it's cheaper and easier and faster. So he went ahead and asked me if I'd do it, and I said, yeah, I'm with you, man. Let's do it. So he makes the movie, and being the perfectionist he is, he wasn't thrilled with the movie that he made because of shortcomings in budget and direction and da-da-da-da-da. And I said, chill, Michael. Just don't give me your bucket of emotion right now. Just give me your movie and leave me alone, which he did. He trusted me. So in about a weekend, I sat down with the movie and worked up the themes and got it kind of up and running in about 3 days. Now, admittedly, I'm 35 years into it. I'm fast and no focus, and I know my machine. So I got it up and running, and I designed a score that was very claustrophobic. A large portion of the movie takes place in a basement with only 2 people. So what music will make that work is what I did for him. In fact, last year I got the award here at Macabre for Best Soundtrack and Best Score for Brutal. So Brutal's been awarded 2 times in a row. So it's a movie to watch, and Michael Patrick Stevens is a filmmaker to observe. This man will be a major player.
How do you make something claustrophobic? Like, how do you use music to create that mood? Like, for example, with Brutal, like...
Well, something claustrophobic is repetitive. If we're in a scene where we're looking at the Grand Canyon, that's different music than if we're in a basement. So the idea is something that is compressed, very minimalistic. It doesn't have a big epic scope to it. It has a little repetitive ostinato, and then there's a couple main 4 notes. So that little repetitive thing over this theme is how you make it work.
Right.
And then it's what instruments you put with that to make it bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Can you tell me about Halloween, The Curse of the Thorn, and your music for it?
You're talking about Halloween 6?
Is that, yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, Halloween 6. So in Halloween 6, there was this other sort of druid influence that wanted to be put into the movie. All other characters are gone, and we're having this, Loomis is the only one, what's our guy, totally spaced, the actor.
Oh, Donald Pleasance.
Donald's the only really returning. Right. Donald and Michael are the only 2 returning characters. Everybody's new. And there was something about there was a baby, and then we had to go get the baby and stuff like that. So in that situation, I tried to put this new character and the druid, where did this all come from, the Legend of Michael Myers stuff, and come up with that. So again, because we're approaching now, instead of the boogeyman, we're going to the boogeyman gang that propels this evil, going to voices again, coming up with an original theme for those guys and that group, and making that plug back into the Halloween themed stuff. And that movie became controversial because we did a first cut, which was the director's cut, and it had a certain kind of ending. And now the Weinsteins, who are producing it, want to pump it up. They want a different ending. Well, the first movie was just fine, but they want to do something. So somebody who's giving you the money wants to do it. So you go back into about the last third of the movie and you recut, and you try to make more action, and you do a little bit of reshooting and make it more horrific than what you had. And so I actually did the score to that twice. One, cut one. Number 2, a improvisation and improvement on the last third of the movie. So actually this year I'm planning on doing an expanded Halloween 6 that has all that movie, all the music, which obviously there's more than a one movie's worth, so it's about a 1.5 movie, so it'll be a double CD.
Wow, okay. Was there any other projects in which your score was asked to be changed or rejected, or has that ever happened on any other projects?
Oh yeah, and it's great. Harry Manfredini, another Friday the 13th guy, he said, "You are nobody in this town until you've had your stuff thrown out." That means you haven't lived.
Right.
So I recently did a movie that never came out. It's still controversial in what to do with it. Did a beautiful score, and then a new production team came through, and they threw the whole score out. Heartbreaking, but it's what happens. I did another movie, same scenario, and actually this was what I came up. A movie called The Omega Code, and myself and a musical partner of mine, John Novello, did the score, and we did this semi-religious stuff because it was about sort of a moment of the end of the world and good triumphs over evil. So we went that route, and they came back and it was an interesting lesson that I learned. It was one of the first times that digital had come into the editing. Mm-hmm. So normally it was difficult to change a movie, physically. You had to pull it down and cut it and all this other stuff. So they were constantly fooling with the edit, and we got bogged down in keeping up with their changes. Mm-hmm. And sort of at one point they just said, "Well, you guys are behind schedule, and we're going to get somebody else." Mm-hmm. So we got canned there. But that taught me a lesson, and this is for all my composer buddies out there. All I do now is I say, give me a version of the movie. Version 1. Go and cut the heck out of it. Do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Come back when you're done. Mm-hmm. And because of the tools now, especially the sequencing and stuff like that, it's pretty easy to edit your own score. Don't get caught up in all their changes. Right. Get the big stroke. Get the what it is created. Mm-hmm. And then edit yourself.
Right.
after they're done fooling with their movie. Because otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of time.
Do you have a favorite score of your own? Do you have one that you're most proud of, most satisfied with?
Of the favorite scores, number one of the Carpenter scores, my favorite is actually Big Trouble in Little China. Why? Because it has the most scope. That movie went to the most different places of action, adventure, scaring, comedy, had a whole Asian influence, a lot of different stuff. So a lot of variety, and that was sort of the peak of the MIDI thing where we had these big, thick orchestras and rock and roll and all kinds of stuff's in there. So I enjoy that the most of the work we did together. Prince of Darkness, They Live. They're all good scores, but my own personal favorite. In the world of things I've done since without John's influence just as a solo artist, in modern times, a couple that I'm going to name off, some you probably haven't even heard of. One is called Basement Jack. Very little movie, but again, it's not the movie, it's the score. Those are available on my website. Brutal, for sure. Brutal is a great score. And then I have another one I'm going to release shortly called Headless Horseman. It was a sci-fi.
I've seen the movie, yeah.
Sci-fi channel thing, and that was with Anthony C. Ferranti, one of his works. Actually, Anthony just got a big booster in his career. He wound up doing Sharknado.
There you go.
So he's launched now. So we'll be back doing some more stuff with Anthony too. So those are some really fun things, and I continue to hone my craft. I continue to get better. I continue to reinvent myself. I really don't want to repeat like any artist. However, I'm not stupid. I've done things that work, so I make a new version of that for a new movie. And then one that just came out in October called Zombie Night, another one for Sci-Fi Channel. And then I did another one for Sci-Fi Channel called Hansel and Gretel. Now these aren't available as soundtracks yet, but this in 2014 they will be available. I'm going to get the CDs together and put them up on iTunes for release. So for all the people that are following Alan Howarth, watch for these new products that'll be out soon.
Cool. I guess my last question would be, outside of your own scores, what is your favorite soundtrack or score?
That's difficult to say because if you're asking of what are my favorite scores of people that are like me, the Tangerine Dream stuff is in the same bag. The score that Trent Reznor did to the Dragon Tattoo, good job, good job. I hear a lot of me in that. Another one that I hear a lot of me and John is what Daft Punk did for Tron Legacy.
Wow, okay.
I almost hear that they listened to Escape from New York and did Daft Punk Escape from New York. I hear the same stuff but done with modern. In fact, I love to work with those guys. I think they're very creative. They're really on top of it. So I'm actually going to reach out to them and say, hey guys, you want to do something?
That's great. Yeah, because I think they're working with Giorgio Moroder.
Yeah. So they recognize that there was value in what the old guys did or the previous guys. So I'd love to work with them. And then as far as DJs, and I'm an electronic musician, so I see DJs as electronic musicians, not DJs. Amin Tobin, through the roof. Skrillex, happening. Deadmau5, totally on it. And for personal taste, Tiesto. I like a lot of what he's doing with songs.
Okay.
Some really nice stuff. So those are my current attentions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alan. I don't want to take up any more time.
That's all right. I'm glad to share. For all the gang out there, I'm very accessible for all the young filmmakers. Don't count me out because you quote can't afford me.
Okay.
And to the big players, hey, I'm here, man. Call me.
Thank you so much, Alan. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks. And like I said, your concert last night was
Good.
unbelievable. I loved it.
Because I got people that want to buy CDs and go back up.
Okay, sure, no problem. Thank you so much. Have a good night.